Copyright hacks hit a record 207 in the first half of 2026, even as total stolen funds dropped 57% to $972 million. On the AI front, AI-generated fraud is forcing banks to rebuild their entire cybersecurity architecture from the ground up. And good news for Nigeria, it has climbed 42 places in 2 years to become Africa's highest ranked country for responsible AI, overtaking Kenya and Egypt. And the answer to a long-awaited question, Kenya's Copyright Tribunal delivered a ruling that AI-generated works cannot be copyrighted, setting a new precedent for creators across the region. These and more stories on tech and innovation in Africa. Welcome to the Tech Tide Africa podcast. This is Karen. How are you today?
Doing good, doing well. Although I didn't get enough sleep in the night because I was sleeping. I just remember I was sleeping a lot throughout the day yesterday. And so I ended up not sleeping until early hours this morning and still taking the moments to get my brain to wake up. Well, we have the podcast as always to get the week started. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. How are you doing?
I think I'm doing worse than you. I'm forcing my body to work. I don't want to get into a rut and then have to force myself out of it. But I'm looking forward to the stories today. We have a lot of AI stories happening today, a lot of cybersecurity happening today, really interesting trends that we've been talking about over the last few months. So I'm looking to get into that. And I think we can start with crypto, the one subject that I just never quite understand. And crypto has just lost 972 million to hacks in the first half of this year, 57% down from the 2.3 billion that was stolen over the same period last year. This is according to TRM Labs. Now, when you look at this whole thing on paper, the number of the hacks in terms of amounts have gone down in terms of dollar amounts, but the number of hacks have actually gone up to 207 from 83 from last year.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story, the crypto story. And one of the things I think about is in recent episodes on the podcast, we have been talking about stable coins a lot, which is also a cryptocurrency, but we would say maybe a better audited cryptocurrency with stable coins. But there are other types of cryptocurrencies, right? And some of these ones are more exploitable. And we are seeing from this report 207 crypto hacks recorded in the first half of the year. That seems like a lot. Just like you said, when you compare it to last year, the first half of last year, there were just 83 incidents. However, there's a very weird contrast because the amount of money actually stolen from the 83 hacks from the first half of last year was $2.3 billion. But then this year that we have 207 hacks, what was stolen was $972 million. So it's a big drop in terms of the value of the transactions stolen, but then the number of incidents has increased. So weird, very interesting. Not sure too much what to make of it, other than maybe the security systems are tighter and they are able to figure out these hacks happening a lot faster and stop the amount of funds that are being stolen on time. So maybe that has also influenced the value that has been lost. For me, that's just speculation, right? That's just me speculating, but it does say something about security that's improving. And of course, when it comes to like cryptocurrency hacks, there's always a North Korea factor involved. There's speculation that, maybe not speculation, but the report says that about 66% of the losses are linked to a North Korean group called the Lazarus Group. My take on it is that cryptocurrencies are still one of those early, not early at this point, they have been around for some time, but in terms of the mainstream is just becoming more conscious of stable coins in the last couple of years. And so it's going to take some time for security To get better, it's going to take time for users to get more familiar with the workings of these things. Just as cryptocurrencies are getting more mainstream, AI is also getting more mainstream. So there are more tools even to perform these hacks. But I think the positive to take out of the story is that a lot less money has been lost, even though there were a lot more attempts.
Yes, I think my biggest concern is the number of attempts is quite high. And when you look at the numbers, the differentiating factor is mainly one large catastrophic event where 1.5 billion was stolen last year in 2025. Now, that 1.5 billion single event is what catapulted the number into what it was. And this year, that hasn't repeated itself. We've seen lower amounts being hacked at every stage. So it makes me a bit cautious as to whether there's as much progress as we hope. I wonder. Yes, it's a good thing that they've not been able to take us out as much money, but then the differentiating factor is one event and we're still halfway through the year. I don't know. The other thing that I have noted is that quite a large number of the risks that took place were not hacks where people were manipulating code. Rather, it was human error. 76% of everything that was lost was as a result of human error. Either it was a phishing attempt where someone took the bait, keys were stolen, custody was not properly done, signing process was breached, people did not follow procedure. And while only 15% of the incidents were as a result of this, the largest chunk of money was lost as a result of that as well. Now, where people were exploiting code and things like that, only 17% of value was lost as a result of it, but it consisted of 60% of the attempts. So I do think there's a lot we still need to do in terms of training staff. We need to do a lot more in terms of putting in measures to protect companies from human error as well as human collusion. I don't know how to go about that, but I do feel that it's a major point of risk. And as we move towards the next story that we'll be talking about, it becomes even more clear of the need of human training and human intervention, like social engineering drills and things like those, putting in place certain key management redundancies and procedures that ensure that you protect yourself from the people who work for you, but also that you teach them how to protect themselves as well, because some of these are not collusions, rather it is mistakenly taking the bait when someone is phishing. So a lot still to be done from that perspective.
Yeah, a lot still to be done. I mean, social engineering is not new. From the very beginning of the internet age, that's one of those things. Even before the internet age, hackers have been around. When we started having the telephone, they had their hacks around those to be able to call other countries. So right from that time up to I think over the week, at some point I watched a brief documentary on Kevin Mitnick, one of the most famous hackers in the world, who has turned his life around to become one of the top cyber security specialists in the world. Hackers have always been around, they are not new. Social engineering has been one of those tools that they have used. Like I said, there's some optimism because it seems like the security is getting better. But now, like you said, more of those exploits are now through human errors. So you now need to address that issue. So at least one issue seems to have been addressed. We'll see over the next year. By this time next year, we can make another comparison. But for now, I think we now need to focus on educating people so that they are not falling for those exploits again. On to our next story. AI is forcing banks to rebuild their entire cybersecurity architecture because just like we talked on the previous story, security is one of those things that it's is evolving. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving. And now we have AI tools that are also making it harder for traditional banking systems to detect some of these new methods. So now the banks have to rethink how they are building their technology. And My bet is it's going to be expensive. I know a couple of years ago now, I think 2 years or 3 years ago, a number of major banks in Nigeria were upgrading their core banking systems. I wonder if this was something they had in mind when they were doing that. But then there were a lot of other banks that haven't. The way AI is growing exponentially, and both the good guys and the bad guys have access to the same technology. You have to use some of these modern tools to be able to combat the attackers. But if your system is wired based on legacy technology, you just can't compete. So now you have to think about your entire cybersecurity infrastructure. And that's what banks are having to do at the moment.
Honestly, Kelvin, I miss the good old days when it was easy to know what is real and what isn't. AI is just causing very insane problems. I have a few thoughts on this. First of all, at some point we thought the biggest issue was deepfake videos and maybe voice cloning. Now we're seeing synthetic identities, forged documents. Fraud operations are being automated through AI, and banks are trying to catch up because a majority of financial institutions, especially traditional financial institutions in Africa, are still very manual in many different ways, right? Most banks still need you to fill out a form to open an account. You need to go to the bank. Now, to a large extent, this is safeguarding a lot of people at the moment because it's deterring a lot of fraud and a lot of risk for banks. However, as we move towards more digitization, then we are opening the landscape for cybersecurity hacks and all that. Previously, we would take the point of issue. For example, we've noticed people are opening fake business accounts, so we fix just that issue. And maybe we ask for, in Kenya, we usually ask for something called the CR12, that you've registered the company who has registered it. You need to come with your documentation. So we fix just that one problem. What we're seeing now is a need to overhaul the entire architecture because we are embedding AI into so many different processes and we don't have a choice because that's where the world is moving. Now you need to think about identity assurance, fraud prevention, AI detection, governance as one function to ensure that the authenticity of whoever is or being served by the bank or claiming to want to be served by the bank. What we have right now has to be completely overhauled. And as you said, and as you've rightly said, it's going to be quite an expensive endeavor, but an endeavor that cannot be ignored because I mean, I don't know. And on top of that, we also have to think about the fact that AI is still not in a place where it can operate on its own. So we need human intervention on the back end. So that creates quite a bit of a headache for the financial system to understand at what point does AI do the work and at what point do we put in human checks? Is this a whole new department? Because I think right now you'll find in most banks, risk is a department on its own, compliance is a department on its own, IT is a department on its own. We might have to have an overlying single department that brings all these things together from an AI perspective and then human intervention on the back end just to ensure security. So a lot of things that I've said there. KYC is going to be even more difficult to attain now. Definitely waiting to see how banks respond to this, but I do think it's going to be, there's a complete rethink of the structure of banks at the moment. All right, and on to good news for Nigeria. It seems Nigeria is doing very well this year. It is now Africa's highest ranked country in the Global Index on Responsible AI. It has climbed 42 places globally in just 2 years, from the 80th to the 38th, and it scored 45.93. This is according to the Cape Town-based Global Center on AI Governance, which usually scores about 135 countries, and it looks at inclusion, ethics, labor and skills, trust and safety, and AI in public service. and the use of AI in public service. I do think this is really good news for founders in Nigeria because you're building trust for investment to flow. And obviously, we're seeing that a lot more investment is expected to flow in the next 4 years, which is good news for anyone that's working in Nigeria in the tech sector and in AI, to be specific.
I think in recent episodes we have been a bit hard on Nigeria, and so it's good to have a positive before my fellow Nigerians will drag me.
Just because we said you don't have lights.
We may not have line, but we have AI policies. And the AI policies that the government has been creating have driven a lot of these growths. And now Nigeria is on the climb. But now we need follow through, right? You have all of these policies in place. You need the builders to build, and you need the government to create that enabling environment for AI to thrive. They seem to be aligned in that direction at the moment. So fingers crossed on that. But yeah, it's a good story. It's a good move from Nigeria as far as responsibility is concerned. And yeah, I look forward to more. For me, policies are important, but when the actual implementation of these policies, people building around these policies start to build, that's when we would see how good the policies are. But for now, I think I going to take the moment, enjoy that Nigeria has been rated number one in Africa for something, and yeah, and look forward to the innovation that can happen around this policy.
Yeah, all I'll say is congratulations. I do think that if there's one thing I've noticed about Nigeria over the last 2 quarters is you guys are making very good policies. Kenya is making some ridiculous ones. You guys are actually doubling down on really interesting policies when it comes to technology and innovation and investments. I think Nigeria and Egypt are making some really interesting strides when it comes to policy and governance. And I think it will just benefit the people who are innovating in those countries.
Yeah, I think Egypt is still on their own in that regard. They have done a lot more. But Nigeria is also, making some moves in that direction. And in a couple of years, it will play out and we'll be able to have conversations around it. But we'll see. We'll see. We haven't gotten some of those wins that, like you see in Egypt, like we talked about in our Q1 reports on Startup Graveyard. But yeah, Nigeria seems to have just started those moves this year. So let's give them a couple of years, or give us a couple of years. Let us cook. Moving on to the last story of the day. Last story of the day is a copyright story, which something that we don't really talk about in this part of the world, at least not in Nigeria. I don't have too many conversations around that. But it's one of those things that is very important. And in Kenya, we have seen the court set a precedence for AI generated works. And the headline is basically AI generated works cannot be copyrighted. This precedent has been set by a court case, Aya Movement Limited versus Cynthia Beldina, on a project called Bible Scripture Stories. So the author used AI tools to help produce the content, but she was under contract with Aya at the time, and they had some disagreements during, I guess, the project, and the company went and registered the copyright under its own name without her consent. And this prompted a legal battle. First of all, she took it to the regulators, the people that are in charge of the copyright rules, and they pulled back the copyrights from the company. And then the company in turn took the case to the tribunal court, and the tribunal court said the AI produced works cannot be copyrighted unless the person using the AI tools can demonstrate sufficient human intervention, which is an interesting phrase to use. And they also told the regulator that it's not their place to pull back a copyright like that. That's for the courts. So it's a very interesting story that sets a precedence. For those using AI in their works, you have to show proof that you, as a human, contributed significantly into shaping the final work. Now, how you do that is, I guess, where the debate would now be, because sufficient human intervention is a very broad term that covers a lot of things. So, yeah, this is an interesting precedent.
Yeah, very interesting. A couple of days ago, I write for a publication in the US, and we got a message recently because it's a journalistic type of publication. And we got a message that the legal team had approached them to discuss issues with AI, and they said that the company had not flagged that some of the articles they were writing were AI enabled. Now, the company did not know that its writers, its contract writers, were using AI because they were not checking. But then apparently it would bring a problem in terms of ownership and authorship. If AI has been used, then you need to state that AI has been used. It cannot be that someone claims to be the author and yet there's quite a large chunk of AI generated content. So we're seeing a lot more clarity coming in. And this is a question that has been on the radar for quite a while, where people are wondering, who is the owner of AI generated content? And what this legal ruling is saying is AI does not have enough legal, you cannot legally call it a person. It lacks that personality to be an author. And so there has to be sufficient, now, as you've said, it's a very interesting term, sufficient human intervention. The question is what? I think we should get perhaps a percentage, that only a certain percentage of the content should be AI generated or something of the sort. But I do think that this will get clearer and clearer as we go, because it has been quite a fog in terms of who owns AI generated content. Now, when it comes to writing, that's a bit easier. When it comes to image and video, I have no clue how you even begin to sort that out, or code. How do you start? Maybe you can tell us, Kelvin, how do you start to show how much of your code is yours? I don't know, because I'm not a coder. I don't know how that works. But I think it's a very gray area that will only continually become clear. I think this is a good precedent because it will help others add on to it. And then hopefully in a few years, we'll have clarity. That's my take.
How do you show that your code is AI generated? That's actually pretty hard to do at the moment. I think with images and videos, Google has been working on this synth ID that's basically metadata embedded into AI generated works. So, in cases like this, you would see if someone was using one of these tools that has implemented that synth ID protocol, you would know that the work is AI generated. So, I think they have some solution for that in images and videos already. But with code, I don't think we have one, or at least I'm not aware of one at the moment. So, still a lot of gray areas because, of course, once you have something like that, people can always create workarounds. It's just something that over the next couple of years, as people continue to use these AI tools, we would see how it develops over time. But yeah, very interesting precedent. And it's one that I wanted us to talk about because people don't talk about copyright a lot in general. And now we are entering even more unprecedented areas with AI and what it means to be a creator. So, yeah, interesting times that we are in. It's the future is looking bright, I guess.
Ah, I want to go back to the past. I want simpler times. I want to be in the 90s, you know? Oh my goodness. Ay, the 2000s are very harsh on me.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving pieces at the moment. But ah, there's no other way but forward. That's one of these things that I hold to. So you just have to keep rolling with it, and yeah, keep rolling with the pod as well.